Well, good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Meng Mangu. I'm an assistant professor extension specialist at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in the Department of Horticulture Science. And welcome to today's webinar, part of the Spring Quick Bite webinar series. And these webinars are designed to be no longer than 30 minutes and give you a quick inside look at some of the progress, issues, and problems that we're facing today in the green industry. And in the past 2 years, or probably more, we've been hearing about the honeybee colony collapse and the role of neonicotinoids. And it was, there was a lot of debate back and forth. So today we have an expert here, Dr. Juliana Rangel at Texas A&M, and she's a bee expert. And so she's going to give us 2 webinars, one today and one the following Wednesday. And today the webinar is going to be focusing on the honeybees, their roles in agriculture and health of bee colony. Dr. Juliana Rangel is an assistant professor of apiculture. She got her education from University of California, San Diego, Cornell, and NC State. And just a little housekeeping here. You may see a panel. This is a GoToWebinar panel, and your panel may be a little different from this, but you'll see that there's this little arrow here. This is where you could open and close this panel, you could close this panel to maximize your view. And somewhere here there is a question. There's a question panel. That's where you could type in your questions. And to have a smooth webinar presentation from Dr. Rangel, you could keep typing your questions as the webinar goes along, but then I will ask her to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation.
Meng, can you hear me?
Yes.
Your screen is black.
Okay.
That's what people are writing. They have a black screen.
A black screen. Oh, okay. So do you see a black screen too?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it better now?
No. And I used to see your slide, but it's gone. Now I can see something. It says honeybees and neonicotinoids. Yeah.
Do you see green vision?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that little technical glitch. So you can, do you see the Spring Quick Bite webinar series, Green Beyond?
Yeah, they say that it's good now.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. So this is greenbeyond.wordpress.com is where I post all these webinar informations, including the recording. So I would welcome you to come visit this website. And so basically what you need to do is click on this webinar. It'll show all the webinar series. We have had several webinars, very good webinars last year, including UAVs in the nurseries or crepe myrtle bark scale, and you'll find links to those webinars. At the end of the webinar, I would like to invite you to answer very short evaluation survey with simple multiple choice. And since this webinar is co-sponsored by TNLA and Southern Region Risk Management Education Center, it's very important that we provide feedbacks about these webinars to our grantors, providing the funding to offset the cost of webinars. So now I would change the control to Dr. Juliana Rangel. She's our presenter today.
All right.
Now you have control, yes. Good. You're good to go.
Do you see it?
Yes.
I'll ask everyone a question and maybe someone can type it. Can you guys see the slide okay before we go on?
That's a very good question. I can see it.
Okay, good. Great. Thank you, Mang Mang, for the invitation. Again, my name is Juliana Rangel. I am Assistant Professor of Apiculture at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. And my lab focuses on three main aspects of honeybee health. And so we do three kinds of research. I mainly focus on aspects of the effects of agrochemicals, including things like neonicotinoids, although not to that extent, but some other agrochemicals that are used to control insect pests, on the reproductive health of honeybee queens and their male partners, which are known as drones. We also do work on the health and diversity of feral honeybees in the United States. So, of course, you might know that honeybees are not native to the United States. They were introduced in the 1800s with the colonizers from Europe to this country, and so we don't really call them native bees because we have species of native bees, but there are no native honeybees to the U.S. So I work on trying to understand the diversity and health of feral bees, those that live in forests, but since we don't have native bees, we can't call them native. We just call them wild honeybees that live in forests. And now we're interested in collaboration with folks from Florida, Michigan, and California. We are looking at the pollen diversity that is foraged by honeybee colonies in urban environments. Part of this work it has some applications to a lot of you folks who are listening to this webinar today, because we, with one of my students, we're looking at the type of plants that are being foraged for nectar and pollen in urban environments, and not just that, just looking at diversity to see whether they're mostly ornamental trees that the bees are going for in the urban environment, or if they're going for native plants that are scattered around patches of the landscape, which might not be treated with any pesticides. So part of the work is looking at the diversity, just trying to identify the pollen sources that are being foraged by honeybees in urban environments. And the other part of the work is being done by the collaborators, and it's looking at the levels of pesticides and the types of pesticides that are found in that pollen and also in the nectar that is collected by the bees. And we're doing this across time, so 12 months or 10 to 12 months out of the year, and we have 15 different sites at each one of those states, Florida, Michigan, California, and Texas. So there's a lot of really cool work that we're conducting in our lab, and we definitely have a lot of information that we can share with you guys. But today, the topic of my talk is a little bit more informational about the economic impact of honeybee pollination in agroecosystems. This is the first part of the two-part series, and the other part is going to be about the aspects of environmental and biological factors that affect honeybee health, and therefore also agroecosystems, because of the huge ecosystem services that honeybees provide to our to us all in the United States and the world. So we have the first, this is kind of an outline of the two-part talk. So this is going to be the content of today's talk plus next week's talk. So first I want to talk about ecosystem services and what those are. It might be of a lot of interest to a lot of you folks in the horticulture nursery side of things. Then we're going to talk about the economic impact of honeybee pollination and also honeybee ecosystem services. And so we're going to go into some detail about that. Then for next week, we're going to then go into detail about some of the factors that influence honeybee health, and then start this argument, and hopefully we can have a conversation amongst all of us about the relationship between healthy honeybees and healthy ecosystems, and whether one causes the other one, or vice versa, and how the two parts of the equation have to both be in good standing for our honeybees to be healthy and productive, and on the opposite side of the equation for our ecosystems to benefit from the services that honeybees provide. And then we'll leave it with some conclusions at the end. So today we're going to focus on the first two parts of this talk, and we'll have plenty of time for questions if you want them. Okay, so the first part is ecosystem services. So one key question between the relationship of between honeybees and the environment is, what is that relationship between honeybee health and pollination services in agroecosystems? So here you see this cartoon, you know, the bees bringing flowers to the partner, saying happy birthday, and the other one says, great, you brought me work. And that is because the most important ecosystem service that honeybees provide to us is pollination, as you will see later. But first, before we can answer that question, we need to understand what ecosystems are, and then agroecosystems. So to put everyone on the same boat, what we understand by an ecosystem is a community of organisms that interacts with their physical environment. So for example, I took this picture. I'm originally from Colombia, South America, and believe it or not, this is in just 15 minutes outside of my hometown. So I live in the mountains in the coffee region. This is here the cloud forest, and so here's a beautiful picture of an ecosystem. You can imagine all the wildlife that is around the forests and the pasture lands, and so the ecosystem is all of the plants and animals and other life forms that interact with the physical environment, the atmosphere, and all of the things above ground. But most importantly, we're interested in agroecosystems, which is a type of ecosystem, a functional unit of agricultural activity that is formed as a result of the interactions between organisms and their physical environment. So here we see a beautiful pumpkin patch, and so for us this would be an agroecosystem because we are receiving agricultural benefit from this interaction between the soil and the plants that are being planted in the patch. So then we go into ecosystem services. And what are ecosystem services? They are the benefits to human welfare that are provided by organisms that interact in those ecosystems. And in the case of for agriculture, it would be for agroecosystems. So there's several types of ecosystem services that different plants or animals can provide to us. The one that comes to mind immediately are the provisioning services. Those include the food, including even seafood and game, crops, wild foods, spices, water, even pharmaceuticals, biochemicals, and industrial products, and even things like energy, like hydropower, biomass fuel. So those are a lot of provisioning services that we receive from agroecosystems. Then we have the regulating services, and those are things like carbon sequestration, climate regulation, waste decomposition and detoxification, purification of water and air, and even crop pollination, which is interesting, and also pest and disease control. So those are regulating services. They regulate the amount of products that we can get from the environment. Then we have supporting services. And supporting services are those that have to do with nutrient cycle, so nutrient dispersal and cycling, seed dispersal, and primary production, and water, soil, etc. One that comes to mind kind of seldom, but it's a very important one, are cultural services. Those are the benefits to our cultural well-being that we receive from ecosystems. So things like intellectual and spiritual inspiration, or recreational activities like ecotourism, and also scientific discovery. So we receive a wealth of cultural services from ecosystems. So we can go on with the ecosystem service being a benefit to human welfare. And so in the case of now kind of pointing it toward honeybees, pollination of crops by wild animals is it's a key ecosystem service. And here you see a picture of a bat that is pollinating a plant, and the same with this hummingbird. Crop pollination is an example of a threatened ecosystem service. So it is threatened because of the dwindling down of species that provide the pollination service due to a lot of things, including deforestation, climate change, etc. So we have pollination services that are provided by all kinds of animals and other factors. About 75% of all flowering plants rely on animal pollination. So imagine that 3 out of every 4 plants require an animal to pollinate them to produce seed. About 200,000 or more species of animals act as pollinators, so that's a great number of the presumed number of species that deal with animal pollination, of which only 1,000 are birds, like hummingbirds, and small mammals, bats, and small animals. Only 1,000. So imagine there's over 200,000 species that act as pollinators, and only about 1,000 are believed to be birds and small mammals and small animals. The rest are insects, including beetles, bees, ants, wasps, butterflies, and moths. So about this number, basically, about 200,000 species of insects are responsible for pollinating 3 out of every 4 plants, flowering plant that's out there. So that's a very remarkable number. When it comes to honeybees, they are incredible in the kinds of pollination and ecosystem services that they provide. So we know that the more notorious product that we receive from honeybees is the production of honey, but they also provide other products from the hive, like beeswax and even propolis. And propolis is it's a product from the hive that not a lot of people know about, and so I want to tell you a little bit about it. Honeybees and other species of bees go to trees and collect resins from those trees. And they do that because they have developed this ability to collect something that is the resin that looks a little bit like glue, and they come back to the hive and they create an envelope of what then is called propolis. So propolis is the name given to those tree resins once they are handled by honeybees and put into the colony. And so that propolis is used as a glue that will seal crevices and kind of line the interior of the hive. You don't see a whole lot of propolis in managed honeybee colonies, probably because we have selected against propolis collection because it's kind of a little too gooey. If you're a beekeeper, you have to deal with this almost every time you open a hive. If they're a propolis hoarding kind of colony, they will dedicate a lot of their foraging force to go and collect resin. But the reason why they collect this resin is because it has antibacterial properties, And there's a lot of research going on out of the University of Minnesota with Dr. Marla Spivak. She and her students have collected a lot of data about the medicinal properties of propolis, and they have done a lot of experiments showing that propolis collection reduces the incidence of bee diseases inside the colony. So it is a way to almost like self-medicate or have some sort of social immunity to disease by increasing the collection of propolis. Well, humans, just like we also take the pollen out of colonies for our consumption, have realized that this propolis has a lot of antibiotic properties, and so they collect propolis from colonies and they use it for in holistic medicine and also for the cosmetic industry. So a lot of cosmetics have propolis. So honeybees are also providing us with propolis for our use and commercialization. But undoubtedly, the most important ecosystem service that is provided by honeybees is pollination. So honeybees are the most economically valued pollinator of crop monocultures and polycultures, arguably worldwide. And the yields of some fruit, seed, and nut crops drop by over 90%, and in some cases even 100% without honeybee pollination, and we'll see this coming up later. So the most important agroecosystem service that honeybees provide to us is that of pollination. So I want to talk about the economic impact of honeybees and their pollination services to our agroecosystems. Wow. In the United States, honeybees are the primary pollinator used in agriculture. Here we have a picture of honeybees in an almond orchard in California, and you will see thousands and thousands of acres that look like this. So to us, this looks very, we can romanticize this kind of picture because the pictures really do look beautiful when the flowers are in bloom. But you can also imagine that these hives that are out in a field that is miles and miles upon miles of the same product and the same kind of pollen type and nectar type can get not only monotonous but also potentially dangerous to the health of the honeybees if they're only receiving that pollen source and that nectar source with perhaps even a subpar or substandard number and amounts of essential amino acids that are required for proper metabolism and functioning of the honeybee. So, but we have undoubtedly increased our ability to produce large numbers of food because of the number of honeybees that we have available for pollination services. So I don't know if you guys are in front of the thing where you ask questions, but instead of asking questions, I would like to ask you a question, and maybe you can just give me an answer here in the question panel. So what percentage of our food do you think is pollinated by, never mind. I gave it away. Well, about 1/3 of all the food that we consume is pollinated by honeybees. So that was going to be my question to you. What percentage of the food we eat you think is pollinated by honeybees? Some people don't even know how important honeybees are in pollination, so they might say maybe 5 or 10%. Some other people, because perhaps of all the publicity that honeybees are receiving, and so people have heard these quotes that really I don't think are real, but from Albert Einstein that said that if once the honeybees die, we will die very soon after, and so people can answer that most of the food that we eat is pollinated by honeybees. But it's not. It's somewhere in between. So it's still a huge chunk. Every bite out of 3 bites that we consume is from a food that was pollinated by honeybees. So that's a big number. So the estimated annual value of honeybee pollination in the country is about $15 billion annually in the United States. So the estimated value of agricultural crops in the United States yearly is close to $50 billion, 15 billion of which is attributed to honeybees and their pollination services. So the direct economic impact of honeybees is profound. So a third of all the total value to the U.S. agriculture is directly as a result of honeybee pollination services. So that's not a low number. That's a lot of money, and that's why we and the EPA and even the presidential mandate, they're now paying attention to honeybees because they know the economic value of honeybee pollination. Honeybees are used for pollination throughout the country, and they get basically carried around year-round to pollinate different crops across the country. So, for example, in Texas and the Dakotas, there's a huge production of clover honey, and there's alfalfa pollination, so grasses, and there's a lot of production of honey. But beekeepers come to Texas. It's one of the preferred states because of its mild weather, as we know. So right now in College Station is going to be 74 degrees Fahrenheit today, while Boston is buried under almost, I don't know, 40 inches of snow or something like that. So understandably, beekeepers tend to like coming to the southern states, especially Texas, especially around this area of Texas, because of its mild weather and because of its availability of forage for bees in the thin months when there's not a whole lot of forage out anywhere else in the country, like in the Northeast. So, the pattern kind of starts like this. Bees will overwinter in southern states, particularly Texas. They start bringing them down maybe in November, December, and they feed them and they kind of increase them, try to make them survive. And then January comes and these truckloads of thousands and thousands of bees at a time are carried across the country, and they get taken to California for the pollination of almonds. So almond pollination is in full swing right now, and those colonies, as you saw in the picture earlier, they will be put in front of acre after acre after acre of almond, nothing else in the horizon, only almond pollen and some nectar. So imagine if you went to the supermarket and all you found to eat was bananas. And at first you're like, oh, yum, a banana. But then 2 weeks later, you're only eating bananas. And you start craving, protein or other things because you don't find all the amino acids, essential amino acids in the banana diet if that's all you have. Well, imagine the same thing for honeybees, only eating almond pollen for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. And then not only that, they're stressed because they don't have a diverse diet. Then later on, they might be taken up to the Pacific Northwest for the production of apple hybrids. They get taken to Southern California for pollination of citrus. Then they get taken across the country for the pollination of blueberries in the Northeast. Cherries, pumpkins, apples. They can be taken down to Florida for pollination of citrus, anywhere in between, a lot of other crops. And the cycle repeats itself, and then they come here for the production of clover honey, and then the fall comes, and then they get taken down to southern states again for the overwintering. So these bees they're taking by the truckloads, tens of thousands of colonies in trucks These boxes are not the best well-kept boxes because this is such a large commercial operation. Time and money are of the essence, so beekeepers are not really terribly careful with the bees that they're managing. So there's a lot of basically carnage. A lot of bees die in this process. Not only that, but because they are so close together, there's a very high risk of disease transmission and contamination of colonies because they're right next to each other. And then they only stay in one place for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks at a time, and then they move to the next monoculture, and so on. This is some data that I extracted from the NASS and other papers, especially this one by Calderon in 2012, who is the person that worked for the last decade or so on figuring out the value of honeybee pollination in different crops. So on this graph, you'll see at the x-axis, you see the percentage of a crop that is pollinated by each pollinator type. Here on the y-axis, we have the crops. So blueberries, peaches, peanuts, strawberries, oranges, apples, almonds, grapes, cottonseed, and soybeans. In the blue, we have the percentage of that crop that is pollinated by honeybees alone, the percentage of the crop that is pollinated by other insects other than honeybees, and in the gray, we have the percentage of the crop that is pollinated in a different way, either by mammals, birds, wind, or water. So right away, we see some interesting patterns. For example, soybeans. Only about 5% of soybean production can be attributed to honeybee pollination, maybe another 5% to other insects, but for the most part, about 90% of the crop is pollinated by either wind or other mammals, so they don't depend on honeybee pollination. On the right here, we have the value of the crop in billions of dollars as of 2010. So of course, these numbers have increased from in the last 4 years. The same thing goes with grapes, and you never really see bees going to grapes and pollinating grapes. They're probably wind pollinated and pollinated by other means. However, there's two that, or a few that come kind of strikingly in your face, especially almonds. 100% of almond production is dependent on honeybee pollination, not even wild bee pollination. It's honeybee dependent, absolutely. The production of apple grafts, it depends on about 90% of it depends on honeybee pollination and the other 10 on other insects, but they rely solely on insect pollination. And cultivated blueberries, about 90% of cultivated blueberries rely on honeybee pollination, but they're also pollinated by some wild bees. And in the absence of honeybees and the presence of native honeybees in greater proportions, blueberries can be successfully pollinated. But as you can see, here you start adding the economic value, so it would be roughly about $5 to $6 billion annually and solely dependent on honeybee pollination for the production of those crops. Here in Texas, a lot of crops are pollinated partially by honeybees, and they are dependent on honeybees for at least partially for complete pollination. And at the end of next week's webinar, I'll talk about what complete pollination means. But we have the production of cotton for production of hybrid seed, dependent 20% on honeybee pollination. Watermelons benefit greatly from pollination by honeybees, cantaloupes, sunflowers, and so on. Other things like peanuts, you can see that it's like almost negligible. So the contribution of honeybees to pollination is quite varied. So here we have some monetary values of honeybees and their pollination services, and so we'll see it clearly coming up. So here we have data from the USDA National Agriculture Statistics Service, and we have here the information to the best of our ability since we started getting records from 1945 to the year 2000. On the y-axis, we have the number of colonies in millions. So these will be millions of managed, not the feral ones that I was talking about that live in trees, but the ones that are managed by beekeepers. And so, interestingly, in 1945, we had about 5.5 million honeybee colonies in the United States. And the numbers even went a little up 5 years later. The numbers started decreasing in the late 60s, dwindling down to under 5. Then they went to about 4.5 by 1985. And something really interesting happened here in the 1980s. And if you were in front as an audience, I would probably ask you what you think this might have been, but you can see this dramatic drop by maybe 25% in the number of managed honeybees in the United States. And this coincides with something very interesting that happened in the United States, and was the advent of the parasitic mite Varroa destructor, which was introduced from a different bee host into Apis mellifera, which is the European honeybee that we have here. And it's like a tick, and I will show you pictures next week. Imagine you having a tick of the size of a paper plate on your body, sucking your blood, and in the process of doing that and weakening you because they're eating your blood and your resources, they're also transmitting several viruses and causing lesions that get infected with bacteria, etc. So all of that happened here in the 80s. And bees, Apis mellifera here in the United States was not prepared to receive this blow, and so the numbers went down immediately, and they only stayed kind of, didn't go down to 0 because of emergency regulations that were provided by the EPA that allowed for beekeepers to start treating their colonies with these chemicals, these pyrethroids and later organophosphates, to try to combat the Varroa mite without killing the bees. When this happened in the 80s, about 90% of the population of feral colonies disappeared as well. So the ones that we were not able to go and treat, like we were able to treat in our apiaries, those died because they were not able to combat the Varroa mite naturally. They just basically took over the colonies and killed them. So again, by the 1990s, we were down from about 4.5 million to under 3 million, and right now we have only about, as of last year, we had about 2.6 million managed honeybee colonies in the United States, practically less than half of what we had 60 years ago, which is remarkable. Here on the y-axis, we have the production of a crop in millions of pounds per year. And I have that because I want to show you the patterns of production of things that depend on honeybee pollination, such as apples. So you can see that they started off in the 1950s, which is what they had records of, with about 3,000 million pounds, and the production has gone up by about 2,000 pounds to above about 5,000 million pounds. And the one that is the most remarkable is the production of almonds, which rely, as I told you earlier, 100% on honeybee pollination. And since we have records in the 1960s, there were about less than 500 million pounds in the 1960s, and the production has gone up to about 2,000 million pounds by 2014. And this number is expected to increase exponentially over time, only if we have the honeybees available to pollinate those crops. So that's going to be something to see, because California is ready with thousands and thousands of acres that are being planted for future production within the next 10 years because the demand of almonds keeps growing, but the availability of honeybee colonies is not keeping up with the need for bees for pollination of almond, amongst other things. This is a kind of a convoluted graph, but I want to show you the economic impact of honeybees at the worldwide level, so globally. And this was information that was produced by Azen and Harder in 2009. It's information that they were able to obtain from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. So I'm going to try to walk you through this. Here on the left, we have, again, most of the records, as you saw from the U.S., they're from around the 1950s or 60s. The same is with the FAO. So they have records from the 1960s all the way to the 2010 or so. And so here we have the year. And on the y-axis, we have the change in agricultural production, meaning compared to the levels that they had in the 1960s, how much has production, agricultural production, changed, either negatively or positively? Of course, as you can see, agricultural production naturally has increased as the number of people on our planet goes up. And so here we have three lines. We have a pink line, a green line, and a yellow line. And we should just focus on the pink line. And the pink line shows the number of agricultural crops that depend 100% on honeybees for pollination of their crop. And as you can see, the number of those, the change in the agricultural production for those honeybee-dependent crops has increased dramatically over time. Interestingly, you can see this point here in the 1990, and if you were in front of me, I would ask you, well, what do you think happened here? And so you can take a couple of seconds to think about this. And the number of bees that are non-dependent on honeybees, the number of crops that are not dependent on honeybees, but also can benefit from honeybee pollination has also gone up, but not like the ones that are totally dependent. Well, here is when globalization occurred and when different countries all over the world opened their doors for trade and allowed different foreign products to come in and for their products to be exported out. So in the 1990s, globalization helped increase the number of honeybee-dependent crops that are required for honeybee pollination. So the growth in the fraction of agricultural products that require animal pollination service has soared since the 1990s due to this globalization. Another way for to see this kind of data here is the value of these in metric tons. So they have the agricultural production here with metric tons. That the value here in 1961. For example, honeybee-dependent crops was 103 times 10 to the 6 metric tons, and it's gone up exponentially since. Here on the other side, we have here, again, the percent change in agricultural production. So agricultural production has increased by about almost 350% by the year 2010 or so. So here, we can see that the growth in the fraction of crops that depends on pollinators has outpaced the growth of the global stock of managed honeybee colonies. And so if there were an equal increase in the number of hives available for the pollination of the increased number of agricultural crops, you would see this dash, this black line would be right on top of the dashed line, because this is the predicted increase of the number of hives compared to the agricultural production. If they were equal, this would be the predicted line. But as you can see, agricultural production has overshadowed the change in number of hives available over time. And so this just gives us a clear indication that we have outpaced the production of colonies and for agricultural production of bee-dependent crops. And most scaringly is that the number of colonies seems to be going down instead of up, and agricultural production and demands goes up, and so I have no idea how we're going to be able to meet the demand for bee-dependent crops. So to conclude this first part, I want to argue that honeybees provide many pollination services in agroecosystems, particularly pollination of very important agricultural crops to the United States. Honeybees are responsible for pollinating over a third of the food we consume, and so they're arguably the most important pollinator of the food we consume. And the population of managed honeybee colonies has continually dropped in the last 40 years or so, while our demand for bee-pollinated crops continues to increase, causing a lot of worries in the agricultural and commodities operations. So next week I'm going to start talking about why the population of honeybees has gone down, and so I'm going to talk about the factors that influence honeybee health, and we're going to go over some of those factors that include pathogens, pests, and disorders. And I want to show you what that varroa mite looks like, just so you get sometimes when the colony is very infested, they can get multiple varroa mites per bee. And if the colony has a really high level of this one particular virus that they transmit called deformed wing virus, the bees that emerge as adults, as the name indicates, emerge with deformed wings, and they are unable to fly because they will never open up, and so they're basically useless because they can't go and pollinate crops. They can't fly out, so those are useless bees for at least for pollen. They're very ill and they're sick, and we'll look at also the effects of nutrition or lack thereof on honeybee health. What some of you might be most interested in, the effects of certain pesticides, including neonicotinoids and systemic pesticides on honeybee health, but also we will talk about how the climate and environmental changes have also caused some of the issues revolving around poor honeybee health. So with that, I want to invite you to visit our website at honeybeelab.tamu.edu. We have a very priced and delicious honey. It's called Aggie honey. This is Mark Hussey, our interim president of Texas A&M. For more up-to-date information, I would invite you to visit our Facebook page, TAMU Honeybee Lab, where we post a lot of different information about honeybees at least once a week. We have over 1,300 followers now. And if you have any questions, you can, of course, ask them now, or you can email me at jrangel@tamu.edu. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rangel. I think you laid out a very good foundation for our next webinar. I mean, this one we know that the honeybees are very important, and as you mentioned in your previous slides, those are some of the issues: the health, the virus, the environment, and the neonicotinoids that this group is most concerned about. With that, we'll see whether we have any questions for Dr. Rangel.